Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about the education system in India. I'll be going through a lot of topics, like how we can improve the syllabus, how we can improve quality of teaching, quality of student uh, consumption, meaning how they can consume the content of the courses, how to diversify a little more, especially on the syllabus front. What are the infrastructure problems? What are the administration problems? Um, what are some of the problems that currently exist in the system? Overall, I have been in and out of the system, both school for the whole thing till 12th standard and then a bachelor's degree. So I kind of understand it more from a student perspective. I've got a little bit of clue of how the teacher's perspective works and how the setup is at a government level. So basically, the funding for schools happens through the state government. Usually, the money comes from the central government budget allocation for education, which happens every year. So that money is transferred to the states, and the states have to use that for the purposes of education. So this is how we have public education system in our country. The government, as you all know, operates government schools, hires government teachers under government payroll, and they give nearly free education, um, which is very valuable. At least I think till 8th standard, it's free education. After that, gotta pay something, I think. But for the money that it takes the student to get the education, it's good, but that doesn't mean it's great. And I will also talk a little bit about the misconceptions about how our education system is currently focused on and how this affects us. Because in the end of the day, let's begin here. I mean, what is the goal of the education system? Basically, the education system is a means by which you learn how to read and write. Hopefully, you get some skills that will be useful for you when you get out of the school system. When you complete, say, a 10th standard or 12th standard, there is a certain level of competency that is expected of you when you go out, whether you are going into the labor market or whether you're going into higher education or if you're going into business, whatever it is, there's a certain level of competency, core competencies that are required of you, which is why we have exams. And the exams are a way of understanding if the person has achieved these core competencies. And I think this is where the first problem starts, right? So we have exams for testing the subjects that we learn: maths, English, science, social, language, which is mostly native language. And I guess this is where the problem really starts, because one of the first things our exam pattern dictates is that you must have the ability to memorize. And our 10th standard examination, 12th standard examination focuses so heavily on memorization and the ability to remember learned concepts that, if we are being absolutely honest here, this level of memorization power is probably not essential in the job market. So that's how terrible it is. The focus on memory and just memory. So there are several other skills, right? There are skills like analytical understanding, cross-functional understanding. There are things like spatial understanding, understanding of data, development of concepts. So there are so many other different aspects in which people can actually develop their core skills, and yet we choose memory as the only thing. Now, memory is extremely important, don't get me wrong. uh, is probably very fundamental, because when you learn a concept, the ability to retain and apply it over and over again should not be a function of you having gained the experience, but it should be rather uh, be acquired because you have a, a remembrance of the concept and an active recall of it. And I think this is one of the reasons why memory is very important. But the extra focus on memory is kind of killing our brain cells, if we're being absolutely honest. Because our brain is not just composed of memory sections, right? We've got several other sections of the brain which create or tend to activate different neurological paths. And these different neurological paths are in turn what drives us, what keeps us healthy and our brains active. And I think when we miss in these aspects, what we do is we start missing in the development process of a person. And this is the reason why I have a problem with the education system, because today what's happening is our focus on just memory-based education is killing the brain cells of the children, right? When the children come out of school, we are expecting them to have some kind of neurological makeup, to have some kind of brain development, right? But unfortunately, what we're doing is we're creating a system where these children can only have brain development in certain areas. And what this does is it creates deficiencies for these students in other areas. Another more pertinent fact of this is that not everybody is able to memorize, right? And yet somehow the memory sections of our brain are not the only thing that exist. Memory is very important and it's huge, but memory itself is not just like a hard disk in which you store data. That's not how it is. Memory can be interconnected. It can be imagery, it can be voice, it can be smell, it can be taste, it can be what you see, what you imagine, what you think of. All of these things form part of the memory. And so the idea that you have to read a book and memorize just from reading the book is one of the things that really bothers me, because you get the feeling that the idea of memorization, or even the idea of memorization, is just shrinked up into just read the book and vomit it in the examination. And this is one of the major problems of our system. In India, this is very prevalent. In every state, this is how it is. And it's unfortunate. I'm guessing that this is common throughout the world, because, I mean, one thing I've noticed is that we say things are bad in India. There are some countries where things are worse. There are some countries where things are better. We are usually, whenever we look at the ranking, we are like 25 percentile in the ranking. Usually that's where we are, meaning there are terrible places, but there are better places, like 75% of countries are better than us. And usually that's how our current ranking is in any system. But we are improving. And that's the good thing, right? We are improving over time. You can see with a number of people who have become educated and who have started going into the institutions where education is to be propagated, you see a little bit of improvement. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of improvement can be done, but it's being stifled. You know, one of the most important aspects of this is the amount of studies, data, information, and the ease of access of this information with the burst of the internet and other revolutionary technologies like Google search, YouTube, and all these different things have created a space where you can access high quality scientific data or any studies, not just scientific, non-scientific studies, which you can use to form syllabus even with the internet, which is very interesting. Of course, we don't want our syllabuses to be created from the internet, but there are so many studies made. There are years and years of model where people have studied students, class groups, school groups, school localities, meaning local areas where there are several schools, and they've studied those students who have taken certain different types of life topics in their schools. And then you have, the studies based on communities, how the performances of the students are based on their communities, what are the expectations, and how a single system used throughout across the board for education is really detrimental to society or the development of education in a society. And so one of the things that kind of bothers me is that even with all of this information, we still have not managed to change education for the good at the rate in which we should be changing. And usually this is a very common feature of any government system, where they're not really motivated to innovate. They're not motivated to, change the existing systems. They're very conservative. They're very cynical of change. And I think this has to change, if we're being frank here. The world is moving very fast, and we are not keeping up with it, unfortunately. So this will not be a problem if we are a small country with a very small population. The problem is we are a large country with a very large population, and to be able to provide for a large country with such a huge population is not easy. And if we keep relying on the government, it's not going to work out. But that's beyond the point of today's discussion. The point is that education is always a means to something. It has always been this way. It is a means to something. But what is happening today, unfortunately, is that people that only go through the education system without awareness of the outside, they come out and they cannot do anything. They are literally physically impaired. They just don't have either the motivation to go out and do something, or they don't know how to do something. And I do think a lot of the reasons why people don't do anything is because they don't know what to do. And what we are creating is purposeless people in our country, in our system. And this is a huge problem, because what happens is the primary motivation of a purposeless person becomes just going and working in a job, earning salary, and that's it, but not producing anything. Now you see this changing a lot with the startup culture in the technology space, but this level of enthusiasm for entrepreneurship has not been sparked outside of the technology space, right? And this brings me to the point of what I'm trying to say. Education has to be a driver of innovation, of business, of ideas, of things like this that are extremely useful to society. So one of the big issues in all of this is the quality of education provided. And I've touched upon the memory aspect. Now let's go and see the other aspects and what type of aspects I'm talking about. Thank you for listening. Consider liking the video and comment if you have an opinion. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos of this kind. Thank you.